Welcome to my third part of the Across the Sea trilogy, analyzing the ancient history of the island from Lost. If you haven't seen the earlier two parts, they are linked in the description. We've gone in the sea, exploring the formation of the island. We've explored the episode Across the Sea. In this episode we're going beyond the sea, reaching out to the Egyptian era of the island. What happened after Jacob laid his brother and adoptive mother to rest, when civilizations thrived on the island? When did all of these structures on the island get built? A lot of this history has already been covered in these Lost Journeys episodes, so I'm gonna summarize all of that content here. Based on the set report and Mark Pellegrino's comment in the 2010 interview, we begin our story in either 43 AD or 53 AD. Jacob is incredibly lonely. There is no one on the island, except him and the smoke monster. The only civilization were the Romans, and they all died. I theorize that before their birth, there was likely a group of people from Mesopotamia who brought with them the knowledge of Akkadian cuneiforms and died out. Ancient Greeks, likely the group that Mother came from, they also died out. And a first wave of Egyptians, who came from the city of Thebes, brought with them copies of the Book of the Dead belonging to the real-life people Ani and Bakhmut, since their specific quotes, spells and illustrations are present on the island, and possibly the Sedet game, unless that washed up on the shore. Everyone is dead, and Jacob has now taken over Mother's job. We know that by being a protector you get a sense of the rules and will of the island, and over the coming days Jacob will have a broader sense of the island's powers and reach. By being a protector he will know the languages that have entered the island, such as Greek, as well as how to write Akkadian and hieroglyphs, and gradually he will gain more knowledge. At this point in time, Egypt is part of the Roman Empire. Alexandria is its capital and is the largest port and second largest city of the Roman Empire. It is best known for the impressive lighthouse and its great library. In Alexandria, you also had works like the Metternich Stela, an ancient steel plate that has carvings that will be replicated on this mural, seen in the episode Dead is Dead. Over the coming centuries, Egyptian hieroglyphs would die out as a written form because ancient Egypt is disestablished. I believe a large ship with Egyptians departed from Alexandria, a group of people escaping Roman rule and wanting to rebuild their Egyptian society somewhere else. We never got a flashback to this period of time, but it's all illustrated here, and we can interpret the story out of this, as well as add in our theories. The tapestry and the rug are very nice illustrations of the history of the Egyptian people on the island, one of the most important eras. Before their arrival, Jacob probably moved out of the caves and settled somewhere else. He decided that the caves was now a tomb that he could visit when he was mourning, and not a permanent home. The smoke monster is roaming around. It might try to leave the island, but it can't escape the dome around it. It's like it's on a chain, tethered to the heart of the island. I think at some point it travels back to the caves and he sees his own dead body. And maybe at this point in time, he realizes he can take the form of the dead. It's a conscious choice to alternate between the two forms, but by being in a human body, he has all his physical senses, he can use his muscles and even has the ability to eat. He might be annoyed by the fact that his own dead body is right next to Mother, so he moves it to the other hole in the cave wall. When Jack and Kate discover their bodies, they are split apart.
Who is he? How did he get here?
Can't exactly perform an autopsy, but doesn't seem to be any major trauma to the bones. There's another one over here. Someone laid them to rest here.
Who?
I don't know.
Where would they come from?
But when Jacob laid them to rest, they were together. I can't see why anybody would move around the bodies unless it was Men in Black or someone with a twisted mind. In 2007, in the episode Lighthouse, the two skeletons are not split. They are back together again. So maybe Jacob actually went back to the caves one final time a few days before his death and reunited the two corpses. Man in Black meets up with Jacob at some point in time. Must be quite the revelation. Jacob learns that he can take the shape of his old self. Man in Black might try to kill him, but is unable to do so. Maybe he jumps at him with a knife, but the island won't let them kill each other. Either Man in Black slips, or he freezes, or the knife will not bulge like an invisible barrier, so he leaves.
Don't waste it.
There isn't enough left to make any difference, Jason.
Oh, let him rest.
But the sooner we find some island with water, the better.
The Egyptians arrive on the island. I believe that the first boat was not brought by Jacob, since this event probably happened very shortly after Across the Sea, and he's still fairly new at this job. Maybe he didn't know that he could bring people to the island. Mother didn't mention that during his ordination. I like the thought that he started bringing more Egyptians after the first ship arrived there. In the episode Aeterno, he says that he brings people to prove his brother wrong, that their past doesn't matter when they arrive there. If people embraced the island as a place where miracles would happen, then they were good and would potentially be the next successor. If they were greedy, selfish, and destructive, and were interested in exploiting it, they were bad. But the thing is, in present days, Jacob does not intervene, but I think he did during the Egyptian era. So something happened that made him stay behind. The tapestry shows Horus using his light and guidance, and we see 9 people that are engulfed by the light, as well as 2 thrones on both sides. The 9 people could simply be the population, it doesn't have to be 9, it could be many more. But I think it's fun that they consider there to be 2 pharaohs or kings. I think Horus is Jacob in this illustration, giving light to various followers. I think that he was more active with the Egyptian people than he ever was during his next 2000 years of protectorship. Unfortunately, the tapestry doesn't show the chronology of the various structures on the island, but we do get some sense in the show, such as the statue needs to be completed before they build the wheel chamber. But what did they start to build? I think that the first settlers that came there became interested in the island, and Jacob interacted with them. If the source of light has a will and can reach out for good people to arrive on the island, people that are willing to protect it, especially now that there is a smoke monster there, I think Jacob will get the idea to build a structure that will harness the light and bring people to the island. It's the Lighthouse. He figured out that he could do what his brother told him, find one of the areas where metal behaves strangely, but instead of escaping the island, use that energy to bring good people, people who would be able to protect the island. And the Egyptians that have arrived there have noticed how their wounds are getting healed, how easy it is to get pregnant there with no child mortality. They would see that this place is magical, a place where miracles happen. Those first settlers, people from Alexandria, happened to have a lot of knowledge about their own impressive lighthouse, started working together with Jacob, building it. It would probably be completed very early. Let's say it's around 56 or 60 AD. They created some sort of ore that connected with the light, which would let Jacob reaching out directly to people off the island. But Jacob, being special, knew that his brother wouldn't get to it. Man in Black couldn't find the heart of the island, just like he couldn't find the lighthouse. You can see a more detailed description in this video, but in summary, Jacob would adjust the mechanism and travel off the island for the very first time, possibly teleporting himself to Alexandria in Egypt, now under Roman rule, to guide others to the island. Both the Lighthouse of Alexandria and the Colossus of Rhodes took 12 years to build. The lighthouse on Lost is quite small in comparison and wouldn't take so long, but the statue at the coast is much bigger than the Colossus and probably took many years to build, longer than 12. To build the Sphinx in Egypt, they had 100 workers, but compared to the enormity of this statue, it would take a long time, and maybe even hundreds of workers. Jacob, having that connection with the island, knew that by leaving it to visit the places across the sea, he knew he would be transported back. It could be a mechanism in the lighthouse that beams him back to the island after a certain amount of time. He had activated the light in many people now, and maybe there were 3 ships with hundreds of people that came to the island. These 3 ships would later depart and are present in the tapestry. Jacob has a fondness for this era, since he made a tapestry of this period in the 1800s, centuries after it was over. It was the first people he brought to the island, and it was a glorious time. People with a lot of knowledge in constructions came. So there were probably several boats docked around this area, where they set up a village. And they would also encounter this area over here, an ancient hidden chamber, buried by moss and dirt. And they excavated it, and in it were documents, papyrus scrolls with old Egyptian writing, portions from the Book of the Dead of two real-life people, Ani, who died around 1300 years ago, and the priest Bakenmut, who died around 1000 years ago. A small group of people had been here before and discovered this place, but died out. The new group of Egyptians share this find with the others at the village. It had illustrations of Anubis, who had been replaced by Osiris as the god of the underworld at this point in time. The Egyptians from Alexandria were probably aware of this, especially if they were at the Great Library, but one thing's for sure, they started to believe that this island was a gateway to the light beyond. It was also a gateway to the underworld. There might be a split between the groups, especially with the distance between the two locations. A group of Egyptians start constructing this chamber and completing what the first wave had tried to do. Let's go back to the tapestry. There are two pharaohs or kings on the island. The obvious explanation is that this is Jacob and his brother, but I don't think so. The Egyptians saw them as gods, and I don't think Jacob would weave him and his brother as two people on thrones. Jacob might have appointed a leader at the temple, and one at the statue. Especially since the Egyptians start to have different philosophies, maybe about the island's relation to the afterlife, and the island's relation to the underworld. Just like all other later civilizations on the island, there was a split. The temple. I really like the idea that the Man in Black got involved and presented himself as some sort of god to them, which will be depicted on the mural in the service chamber. He must have figured that he can take the shape of others too, other dead people. Being in another disguise as an Egyptian leader at the temple is a great way to still trick Jacob, as if he, in the form of the Egyptian leader, met with the other leader and told him that they were going to explore the island and build tunnels instead, and this group would not know of any foul play. The group at the coast were more interested in the fertility and the healing touch, the miracles on the island. Jacob's followers are currently building the statue at the coast, who symbolized fertility and childbirth. Men in Black's followers are spending years building underground tunnels. Men in Black had more social skills than Jacob since he grew up with Romans, so I think he would be a great mentor for many of the newcomers, getting them on his side. They complete the service chamber, as well as the tunnel entrance. Men in Black might alternate between being an Egyptian himself and a smoke monster. They certainly viewed him as some sort of god of the dead. They will not create the pyramid structure at the temple, that will be done later, but they will have the pool room, the spring, where Egyptian carvings are on the wall, and they are quite gruesome. They are taken from the Book of the Dead and shows the lake of fire. People were probably placed in the pool and then claimed by the master. More on that in this episode. Over many millions of years, the source of light and the volcanic activity on the island have created natural caverns and underground slopes where water and the light are flowing around like the lifeblood on the island. There's probably tons of man-made underground chambers and tunnels that follow the water, trying to find the heart of the island. One of them are leading up here, where they build an enormous chamber. This room, which resembles some sort of chapel, will be decorated and fixed over the centuries because it has a newer building style. It could be a tomb for Egyptian leaders. What this chapel has is an enormous slope to the above ground area, which is how the hostiles would wheel down the heavy hydrogen bomb. I think that the Egyptians used this pathway to transport rocks and limestone to create all these walls around the tunnels. The reason why I mentioned the natural slopes of water is that above it would be the summoning room. They probably created a small chapel next to it, and in it would be the door to the summoning room. They carve it with hieroglyphs, including the phrase, "to summon protection." The monster protected them from the rest of the people. Some years have passed, and I can imagine that the groups have set up some rules that they control different territories, almost that there's like a line between them. Jacob might have also brought some Greeks to the island with some knowledge of the Doric column style that would be influenced in building a sort of temple on this side of the island. This could either have been built after Across the Sea or built by the Greeks that were there prior to Across the Sea. Since the Doric order was the predominant type of temple on the Greek mainland and among the Western Greeks of Sicily and southern Italy prior to that time, the essential elements of this style had been put into place by the middle of the 6th century BC. It could have been built by Mother's Group, but it could also have been built later on. The statue is completed. It might be sometime in the 90s AD or maybe even later. Let's say it's around 300 or 400 AD right now. So we have hundreds of years of generations on the island that have built massive tunnels and the statue. And the Egyptians thrive. As illustrated on the tapestry, there is harmony. They have agriculture on the island, even music. In the midst of all of this, someone just appears.
No.
A group of time travelers. Sawyer, Jean, Juliet, Miles, Faraday, and Charlotte on the brink of death. And in another area, we would have a very confused Bernard, Rose, and Vincent. Technically, by the rules of the show, the random zodiac raft should also appear in the Egyptian era. How crazy would it be for a couple of Egyptians to suddenly spot this bizarre piece of futuristic machinery and then it disappears? They are only here for a short while. They disappear, but leave behind the two non-living things that they were not touching during the final flash. The rope and Charlotte. Charlotte stays behind, because by the time the characters reunite with Daniel, he said she stayed behind in the final era they were in.
Isn't it a flash? She was gone. Her body just disappeared.
And if there are hundreds of Egyptians walking around this area, someone must have found her. How peculiar. Seeing a body with unusual clothing and a modern digital watch, they might have rushed back to their leader and told him about this discovery. That there was something important about this area. Man in Black might have encountered this place before when he was alive, but he and the Romans brushed it off, since there was not a lot of magnetic pull here. This is also evident in the future. You don't see metals being pulled down the well like we saw in Across the Sea. This area over here had much more magnetism to it, but maybe this was a sign. A dead body from the future, suddenly appearing out of nowhere. Man in Black has the ability to know what the dead were thinking of when they died. He even has the ability to enter their minds and memories. Man in Black scanned Locke for his memories back in Season 1, but he still has memories of Locke after that event, such as this scene or how Locke died, or even what he was thinking of. Charlotte might not even be a corpse by the time they discover her, and they can automatically see that it's not one of them. This is not an Egyptian that Jacob has brought to the island. If they go through her pockets, they will find a wallet with strange symbols. If the Egyptians brought Man in Black to this place, he would know of her memories prior to that. And that included discussing the orchid with Daniel.
Dan, is this gonna work?
It does make empirical sense that if this started at the orchid, then that's where it's got to stop. But as far as bringing back the people who left in order to stop these temporal shifts, that's where we leave science behind.
And Locke confirmed that by going there, they will leave the island.
Just over the next ridge. How you will leave the island? I'm not sure yet.
So Man in Black gets a confirmation that this really is the way. He puts all of his men in the project of creating the well, even with a small temple around it, like this. They're also going to carve a tunnel that connects with other tunnels on the island. They carve a lot of hieroglyphs here on the column. Hieroglyphs that translates to resurrection, travel, and time, all fitting with what this room is about to do. He creates a new wheel, using the same system he and the Romans engineered, and then trying to accomplish what has been his goal for decades, leaving the island. But he can't. In a bright light, the island moves, but he is not engulfed by the light. It rejects him, just like in the future when Man in Black as Christian Shepherd is forced to watch Locke being teleported. Man in Black is still stuck in this chamber to the island. What has happened is that Jacob has realized that his brother is trying to leave the island and has gotten to the light. The flow of water has been disrupted. This is bad. The Source has been an impeccable strong force in the universe. As we explored in the first part, it withstood the expansion of the universe, the major temperature shifts on Earth, horrendous volcanic activity, the shifting of the tectonic plates, but I guess that's just like every living thing, it does not last forever. That membrane around it is now thin as tissue. It's now about to be ripped open, and water is leaking into it at an irregular speed. Jacob made a promise to Mother that he will never go down to the heart of the island, but he has to make some actions. He can feel that the island is weak now. He takes 3 of his most trusted followers and lets them inside the bamboo field, into the heart of the island. There could be more people, and we don't see their skeletons, but in the series finale we see 3 skeletons, so that's what I'm working on. This situation is similar to Chernobyl, where 3 brave engineers were sent beneath the nuclear core at the breached power plant to drain the water valves.
And open the sluice gate valve here. The valve will be difficult to operate, so we'll need 3 men. We'll need to know the basement layout. And of course, any volunteers will be rewarded.
For those who watched the HBO show, assumed these 3 were destined to die, but they survived. The water acted as a neutron shield because of the hydrogen. They were also working very fast down there, but the workers on the island spent much longer down in the source. They died there, and you can see their skeletons, 2 grouped together and 1 separate. There's probably a large quantity of building material here that was used to build the lighthouse. They will gather a lot of rocks. Everyone on the island can probably sense that the iron sealing powers are not as strong as it used to. Maybe there's more sickness, women are dying at childbirth, maybe it doesn't heal anymore due to the disturbance that was caused in the wheel chamber. Maybe the water at the temple doesn't pump as well as it used to. I can imagine that it's like a puddle right now. When Jacob's followers have enough material, the 2 sacred guardians appointed by Jacob are ready to enter. People who know the language of hieroglyphs, Akkadian cuneiforms, as well as know about the battle between the Man in Black and Jacob, are touched by Jacob's island powers and then lowered down. Just like the Swan Station, you have 2 workers that try to alternate between keeping a cork in, while also constructing the entire stone lid that is above the source. The show cements this connection in the series finale with the dialogue as well as this shot over here. And then there will be a 3rd person, the one in charge of supplies, who will keep on lowering down material to them, and possibly bring food and water. They are all willing to die for the island, because they know that the heart of the island is the gateway to the afterlife. They can also spot these natural holes here. I don't know how long they will keep doing this, but in the end, they place the stone cork in the fragile hole. One of them wrote the top 2 lines in hieroglyphs, and the other wrote the 2 other lines in Akkadian cuneiforms. Line 1 reads, "Embrace that which the balance hath weighed. Let a path be made for the Osiris in the great valley, and let the Osiris have light to guide him on his way." Osiris being Lord of the Dead. He had replaced Anubis as the Lord of the Underworld, but the Egyptians that followed Man in Black were still worshipping Anubis. Depictions of Osiris and Anubis still appeared long after the Egyptian dynasties were disestablished, so I'm not putting any weight to it. But the stone cork here will finally create a balance in the light and the water. It's going to let a little bit of water drain into the source, while the rest will continue on giving its lifeblood to the other pockets on the island. It's all a circulatory system, as the showrunners called it. This keeps the balance, and this is the light that will guide them to what lies beyond. They view this as the literal gateway to the afterlife. Line 2, he hath reconciled the 2 fighters, Horus and Set, the guardians of life. They connected the 2 brothers' quarrel with the gods Horus and Set. They projected their own beliefs onto them, which is why I believe Horus here is supposed to be Jacob, giving a beam of light to the Egyptians. Just like many others have connected them to Jacob and Esau, the power struggle between them resembled the Osiris myth, one being the guardian of life and the other being a guardian of death. Line 3 and 4 break the immovable yoke that we may sleep, and that silence may reign and we may sleep. Sleep means death, and silence is the end of the conflict between the 2 brothers. In the end, they would die because of the amount of time they spent near this strong surge of electromagnetism. The island would let them die when the job was done. Both of the Stone Cork creators, as well as the 3rd guy, perished down there. Jacob's rug. While Jacob was occupied on the south end of the island, his brother was occupied on other dangerous stuff on the other side of the island. and that is the brutal depictions on Jacob's rug. He claimed the followers waged a war against the other group. Just like Dharma and the hostiles, there could have been conflicts around the territories. They could blame them for the lack of magical powers, or that Jacob himself had granted them entry to the heart of the island while they were shut out, and the other group could blame Men in Black's followers for creating the wheel chamber and messing with the island, making it move or remove the healing powers of the island. Although that was restored when the Stone Cork was put in place, the time before it was finished, there was turmoil. For all we know, the island could be somewhere in the Pacific Ocean right now, and as seen in the top column here, they waged war. Chariots were included. There are tons of reasons why they should fight amongst each other, but Men in Black would make sure his followers take some of them as prisoners. I wonder if they used Hydra Island as some sort of prison, where they tortured the others. Since you can see on the rug that they have imprisoned someone on a boat. In one way, this story keeps repeating, with Hydra being a prison for both polar bears and our main castaways almost 2000 years later. Maybe they were tortured about some information about the heart of the island, or maybe something else. You see some brutal depictions like this guy being stabbed or this guy being hung upside down, and here you have them all in chains. This creates a wide variety of theories on what might have happened, but it's not pleasant. There could be hostages on either side and they threaten to kill their families and destroy their homes. You also see this depicted on the temple wall, with Egyptians being smited. The rug says, "Now you must embrace this evil war." The ground ran with blood, and then death's black cloud enveloped. The war probably destroyed the sanctuary over here, leaving only one stone column in the end. It probably destroyed the village over here, the chapel over the summoning room. They pretty much torched the entire island. Blood was everywhere. But Men in Black's people won. The smoke monster appeared and slaughtered the rest of Jacob's people. All that remained of the amazing Egyptian village is a couple of stone columns and a stone bench. The end result is that to escape the wrath of Men in Black, Jacob would send his loyal Egyptians away. Those who survived, away from the island. As a protector, he would know how to get out of the island. Just follow a certain direction, and they would depart from the port at the statue. Since you can see on the tapestry that they are facing the ocean, leaving the island. And once again, Jacob was all alone. He has now set on a different philosophy, being distant from the people he brings to the island. And it would take many years until a new group came, not telling them there's distinction between right and wrong. They should figure that out themselves. He probably felt responsible for the things that happened, while Men in Black was furious that he was not able to leave. The island was moving around the planet as seen on the map in the Lighthouse station. It's been everywhere. There could be others who came to the island during the early Middle Ages, but I think that there was a huge time gap where nothing happened, but the island was still moving around. At one point, the island came to South America, where I believe a group of Mayans would come to the island. Let's say we're around the year 1000. In a previous video, way back in season 1, I theorized that a Mayan civilization came to the island and created the rope bridge. Mainly because the design of this rope bridge reminds me of various rope bridges from that culture. One of the people could be Aeterno from the list of candidates. They would also introduce the black and green tree frog to the wildlife of the island.
I'll be damned. All that noise from this tiny critter.
Maybe they found the spring of healing water and saw the various carvings. Maybe even they started drawing sketches of blueprints of a temple-like structure they want to build. They were all moving around on this part of the island, crossing the rope bridge, but they all died out. Just like the famous phrase, they come, they fight, they destroy, they corrupt. Maybe Aeterno, one of the candidates, the last living member of the Mayan civilization, found the wheel chamber and turned the wheel, which made the island jump from South America to the Indian Ocean. And thus in a short time, we have new arrivals. India has a vast history with dynasties, building styles, and a colorful religious history. A group of Indians, believing in the Hindu religion, came from the southern part of the country, where Dravidian languages originated. They arrived on the shore of the island. This was a large group, and just like the Egyptians, they were fascinated by the island's mysterious forces. One of them might have been Gupta, who was a candidate, and maybe it reinvigorated some of Jacob's interest. After all, it's been centuries since the Egyptian era. I talk about the Hindus on the island in much greater detail in this video, so check it out, but in summary, they found the spring. And maybe some blueprints from the Mayans. The Indians were quite the builders themselves, with a Dravidian style of Hindu temples. So they used their architectural style and incorporated that with the Egyptian room, creating this impressive building, and the wall around it, even decorated it with Egyptian hieroglyphs. Jacob might have figured out that he could make people ageless, using a similar transfer of power that Mother did to him all those years ago. I think Gupta was the first temple master, but both him and his people died in the end. A couple hundred years pass and we come to the Renaissance. Various European sailors come to the island, and as I discussed in the candidate video, as well as this one about Lighthouse, someone that Jacob considered to be his successor came to the island, namely candidate 108, Wallace. He proved to be a good person in the community, which would also consist of several other sailors because we are entering the age of discovery. There's sailors all around the planet now. By the Englishmen arriving on the island, being inside the island bubble, is what activates the English language in Jacob, and because the island knows, the Protector knows. We also see Men in Black speak English in Aeterno. I wonder if it's an easy trick for him. He appears as a dead person who speaks English, and by doing that, Men in Black automatically knows English. In the coming months, several ships come by. The island might be somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. Some of them could have probably strengthened the Jughead chamber with the groined walls in the roof, a common technique during the Roman Empire that lasted for centuries, but this could have been done earlier. Maybe they also created a castle or a building over here, one that could be destroyed over the years. And I like the notion that Wallace was invited in to Jacob's home inside the statue, as Jacob tells Ricardo.
What is inside?
No one comes in unless I invite them in.
Meaning that this has happened before. He was told a little bit about the island. Wallace might have figured out the magic of the island's reach, and calculated it to be a string of numbers. He came to the lighthouse and suggested for Jacob to modernize it with newer equipment and replace whatever Egyptian system he had there. As I discussed in this video, this system he has here is newer and employs the modern Hindu-Arabic numeral system, which didn't exist during the Egyptian era. Using a more precise and modern system, Jacob would have a much better way to beam in and out of the island to visit future protectors. Wallace might have brought another candidate, such as Dawson or Paddock, to help carve this new system. There was also an Italian named Grimaldi on the list of candidates. I like the notion that he is the one who brought that Renaissance loot that is in the Cave of Names. I theorize that Grimaldi might have been the first one to realize that the smoke monster reacts negatively to music, which is what Dharma will figure out centuries later when they create the Sonic Fence. A bunch of Spaniards also came to the island: Vargas, Ortiz, Amistad, Rodriguez, Domingo. They could also be sailors trying to discover new land. Just like Oceanic Flight 815, you have people with various backgrounds and languages, some with a deep understanding of the island, another is a musician, and so on. But you know how the story goes. Either Smokey comes and kills them all, or they kill each other. The centuries would go by. This area over here starts to sink. By modern times, this is where the beach is eroding. But in the past, there was a stretch of land here that is slowly sinking. The reason for this inclusion is to make sense of a map in Season 3. Several explorers would come to the island. Like I mentioned in this video, people from the Netherlands, the Scandinavian countries, Indonesia and Poland could have come to the island in the past. Then we come to the 1860s, and Jacob still cling on the harmony of the Egyptian era, the people he had the most attachment to. One of the strongest cases of nostalgic artworks, reminiscing his younger days over 1,000 years later, an era that ended in disaster. This is also why the Egyptian era happened after Across the Sea, since Jacob would not have any affinity to this culture if this happened before he was born. At some point he read Homer's Odyssey and incorporated some of its phrases into this rug and loom, thinking back on the glory days of the island. Little did he know is that he is about to enter the new era, When Ricardo comes to the island, Jacob thinks back on how he has run things in the past, and together they will create a better system for the civilizations on the island. And this collaboration will be the stepping stones in the most important part of the island's life, which will be the arrival of Oceanic Flight 815 over 100 years later. That is the Sea Trilogy, the history of the island. We only have 2 more episodes, regular Lost Journeys episodes. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you like and share this video, because this trilogy took a lot of time to edit. See you in the exploration of what they died for.